Morning, everyone. Greetings to our Hyde Park 2018 Veterans Day Memorial Ceremony. I'd like to have everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. And I'm covered. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
FDR high school student Alina DeVecchio will sing the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land
Thank you, Elena. Very nice. I would like to invite Legionnaire John Kennedy up for the invocation. Please stay unencumbered.
Heavenly Father, we offer thee thanks and praise as we are gathered here today in your name to honor those who have served in our armed forces. Amen.
Cover. We have Dan Kuffner in the audience, that was former county legislator, also responsible for introduction of the legislation to adopt the USS Roosevelt as the ship of the county. I'd like to have a round of applause for him. This is quite an auspicious day. For 100 years ago, in about 5 minutes, the armistice was signed, ending hostilities in the First World War. You may sit down, please. I'm sorry. I have a little document here I'd like to read, kind of describing the event that happened 5 minutes from now, 100 years ago. On a chilly morning of November 11th, 1918, German and Allied leaders gathered in a railway car in the forest near Compiègne, France. Germany had suffered stinging defeats in the Allied 100 Days Offensive. The German economy was in shambles. After 3 days of negotiations led by France's Ferdinand Foch, the time had come to admit defeat. Germany signed the armistice agreement in Foch's personal railroad car. The armistice would bring an end to fighting in World War I. The Great War resulted in more than 37 million military casualties worldwide. The armistice would take effect 6 hours later on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The delay allowed for the news to travel among the Western Front. Terms of the armistice included Germany's surrender of military weapons and hardware, the release of POWs, immediate evacuation of occupied lands in Belgium, Luxembourg, France, and Alsace-Lorraine, and other occupied territories. And Allies would occupy land in Germany, creating a neutral zone along the Rhine River. The armistice was short-lived, or was a short-term agreement, intended to end fighting. After it was signed, Allies gathered in Paris to draft a more comprehensive Treaty of Versailles. The treaty required Germany to accept responsibility as the aggressor and for a loss and damage suffered. It was signed in the following year. I'm hesitating because in 3 minutes I would like to ring our bell 11 times to commemorate the signing. So if anybody has a comment at this moment, I'd like to have voice it if you would like. Because I'm hesitating because I want to have this right on the button for 11 o'clock. And that clock and my watch are pretty much alike. There's a little bit more about the armistice on this literature I got, so I might as well read it to just fill in time. America and its allies treated the dead and wounded. The war to end all wars was over. But in the process, a generation of common young men distinguished themselves with uncommon heroism and valor. Soldiers like PFC Walter A. Sheminsky, who entered a cellar to set up a telephone and encountered 11 enemy soldiers. He single-handed killed 2 and took the 9 prisoners. He was later awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. Or Cook Harry C. Rickett, who fed exhausted soldiers even though his kitchen was under intense bombardment. He collected water for cooking from a spring that everyone else refused to approach because of the heavy shelling. All right. I'll cease right there. I would like to have Ralph Alsterhout come up, please. Ralph is a World War II Battle of the Bulge veteran. And I would like to ask Ralph to ring that bell 11 times to signify the signing of the armistice 100 years ago. So, Ralph, anytime you're ready.
I'm going to wait 10 seconds. If you don't mind. Mike, I think it's appropriate that we mention Flanders Field.
All right.
I don't know if you have the poem with you on Flanders Field, but I think that would be nice. And
Dan,
that's what
Dan,
the
do you have
copies
it?
of are.
Would you come up, please? Flanders Fields was where most of the, in Belgium, was where most of the fallen soldiers were buried. And there was a poem written about it after the war. So Dan will read the poem.
The poem was written by Lieutenant Colonel John Craig. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still braving, singing, fly. Scarce heard amid the guns below, we are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields.
Thank you, Dan. That was very nice. We will place wreaths outdoors after the ceremony. We've got an abbreviated ceremony here. At this moment, we will move the wreath from the table to the stand, and after the ceremony, we'll move it out to the War Memorial. So I would like to invite Supervisor Rohr to please come up. I'll escort her to the town. I would like to invite Congressman Faso to put the other wreath with my assistance. We have 3 volleys of firing squad. Oaks Veteran Councilman Raymond Strom will play taps. Please stand. May be seated, please. At this time, I would like to thank John Golden for his donations of rehabbing the flag at the War Memorial out there. Let's give a round of applause for John Golden. I'd like to invite several speakers up to the podium to say a few words about Veterans Day. First, I would like to invite Hyde Park Supervisor Eileen Rohr. Eileen, please come up.
Good morning, everyone, and a sincere thank you to Mike Athanas and the American Legion for yet again organizing another wonderful event to honor our veterans. And really, it's an honor to have so many of the greatest generation in our town hall. You know, my dad was one of you, and he's gone now, but I always have a special place in my heart for all what you provided to us, the care, giving of yourselves to go enlist in World War II and fight the good war, you know, give us what we have, know as our freedom, so thank you. But also to recognize our congressman, thank you, Congressman Faso, for coming to Hyde Park Town Hall on this very special day. So though all Veterans Days are special, a brief moment every year where we honor those who have answered the call to service to their country in the bravest of ways. It is a day where, for many of us, we reflect on the loved ones who served, many who are now gone, and remember with hearts filled with gratitude their sacrifice, their gift to us and to our nation, and the cost of that gift to their families, and for many of them, to their personal well-being. But today, as we commemorate the 100th anniversary of Armistice Day, the end of what was originally called the Great War, but then became World War I, when it turned out that it wasn't the last war to end all wars, we recognize how vitally important our veterans are to the events that have taken place in this last 100 years. Our veterans, all of you, have changed history. They've protected life and limb of America, and with over 100 years of sacrifice. They've often given their lives so the rest of us could live in the society and the country that we feel proud of and comfortable in, and that we can exercise our freedoms. And for that, we are revered worldwide, and I hope that will continue, that we can be an example for the rest of the world on the way to accept people and to live with integrity and give our all for our country. So the profundity of the sacrifice requires each of us to offer our sincerest respect and gratitude to each of you who have served. And so thank you all for what you have given to us, and we honor and respect you for your service. So thank you.
I'd like to call Dan Kuffner back up, please. He has a letter from the USS Roosevelt. It's apropos that he reads it, since he was instrumental in having it happen. Yes. And he will also read some other things as I go down the list.
I'm honored to read a message from Commander A.E. Jones, the current Commander, U.S. Navy, of the USS Roosevelt DDG-80. To all residents and veterans of Dutchess County and Ulster County, Every year we celebrate Veterans Day to remember those who have served our country, defending freedom and supporting democracy. On this day, we honor so many great Americans, as well as one of the greatest Americans in the proud history of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Roosevelt, our 32nd president, devoted his life to the welfare and prosperity of our great nation and our armed forces. His dedication to our military was unparalleled, and he was known as, quote, the champion of freedom by Sir Winston Churchill. The USS Roosevelt now presents an annual Champion of Freedom Award to a young junior officer who reflects leadership qualities similar to those exhibited by President Roosevelt. Eleanor Roosevelt's legacy and spirit still live on to this day and is always present, inspiring the crew of the USS Roosevelt DDG-80, the 30th Arleigh Burke-class Flight II guided missile destroyer, dubbed the Arsenal of Democracy. Roosevelt carries on this legacy every day since commissioning 18 years ago, as she maintains freedom of the sea and deters aggression around the world. The sailors aboard Roosevelt continue to uphold FDR's four freedoms with honor, courage, and commitment as they are out on the front lines carrying out the mission of the Navy. The supportive and loyal community of Dutchess County, New York, has adopted our vessel as their fighting spirit, and the crew could not be more grateful. As we observe another Veterans Day in the greatest country on earth, we stop and remember what it truly means to provide for the greater good, whether it's efforts given, time spent, or offering of the ultimate sacrifice. The Roosevelt crew extends their gratitude for all who have served before or continues to bear the weight to defending this great nation and preserve freedom and liberty around the world. Very respectfully, A.E. Jones, Commander, U.S. Navy, Commanding Officer, USS Roosevelt DDG-80.
I would like to ask Dan to read a proclamation from Senator Sue Serino's office for this day. Dan?
Honoring the 100th anniversary of Armistice Day. Whereas November 11, 2018 marks the 100th anniversary of the signing of the armistice between the Allied powers and the Central powers at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, this momentous event effectively ended all military operations and hostilities in all theaters and fronts of World War I. And whereas, attendant to such concern, I, New York State Senator Sue Serino, hereby recognize the 100th anniversary of Armistice Day to take place on November 11th, 2018. And whereas, at 5 a.m. on that historic morning, Germany, depleted of manpower and supplies and faced with imminent invasion, signed an armistice agreement with the Allies in a railroad car outside Compiègne, France. And whereas, also known as the Great War and the War to End All Wars, the First World War began in 1914 and left 9 million soldiers dead and 21 million wounded, with Germany, Russia, Austria-Hungary, France, and Great Britain each losing nearly 1 million or more lives. And whereas, in addition, at least 5 million civilians died from disease, starvation, or exposure. In total, 52,947 Americans made the ultimate sacrifice, and 202,628 were wounded. And whereas, the first official Armistice Day events were held on the grounds of Buckingham Palace, England, on the morning of November 11, 1919, Also, in November 1919, United States President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed November 11th as the first commemoration of Armistice Day. And whereas Armistice Day became a federal holiday in the United States on May 13, 1938, dedicated to the cause of world peace and to the hereafter celebrated and known as Armistice Day. And whereas in 1954, after lobbying efforts by veteran services organizations across the country, Congress amended the 1938 Act, changing the word armistice to veterans. President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed the legislation on June 1, 1954, and from then on, November 11th, became a day to honor the brave and steadfast American veterans of all wars. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, New York State Senator Sue Serino, hereby recognize and honor the 100th anniversary of Armistice Day, dated November 11th, 2018, signed by Senator Sue Serino. No, I'm good.
Thank you, Dan. That was wonderful. I'd like to bring up the 19th Congressional District Congressman John Faso to give his comments on Veterans Day. Thank you.
Well, Mike, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Supervisor Rohr and all of the veterans, especially our World War II veterans in attendance. I can't remember when it was that Mike invited me to come here today. But we were at some ceremony this past summer. That's right. That's when it was. I was driving here today wondering when exactly that was. And I think, thank you for the reading, Dan, of Flanders Field. That is something that all of us grew up in school reading that and learning that. And there were some very, very amazing poets and poetry and works of literature that came out as a result of soldiers being in World War I, as they called it, the Great War. It's astonishing when you think that World War I ended 100 years ago on this very day, and all of the things that happened subsequent to World War I, and the things that happened that actually brought the United States into that war. And it was mentioned that in Senator Serino's proclamation, 52,000 Americans died in World War I. Another 63,000 died from influenza, from the Spanish flu. And when you think in that era of during and just after World War I, the millions of people that died around the world, one of the contributing factors was the war itself and all of the interaction that people had and the travel that helped spread that flu. When you think about how we got into this war, and I've always been fascinated by this as well, the Germans declared unrestricted submarine warfare because the United States was then an arsenal of democracy as well, and we were shipping food and other supplies, although not so much in the way of military supplies, but we were a lot of necessary shipments of supplies were coming from the United States to Europe, and the Germans wanted to stop this. This was their last gasp because they were running out of food and men and material, etc. So they decided unrestricted submarine warfare in about February of 1917. They also did something else that actually promoted and prompted the United States to get into World War I. It's the famous Zimmermann telegram. And the Zimmermann telegram, Zimmermann was the foreign minister of Germany, and they had a plan to keep the United States out of war, and they knew with unrestricted submarine warfare and sinking our ships, it would incite a reaction in the United States. So what were the Germans planning? They actually planned with Mexico and with Japan to inspire an invasion of the United States from Mexico, supported by Japan. And that invasion, the hook to the Mexicans was, we'll give you back Arizona, New Mexico, and part of Texas. How fantastical it seems today. But indeed, when the British intelligence found out and they intercepted the famous Zimmermann telegram, they were worried. They had this information that would surely bring the United States into war and inflame the United States. But they were worried that President Wilson, who wanted to keep us out of the war, President Wilson would think it was some kind of concoction of British intelligence, that this fantastic plot couldn't possibly have been true. So the British devised this elaborate ruse to get the Americans to believe that they discovered the existence of the Zimmerman telegram in Mexico City. And you know, they say that history doesn't repeat itself, but sometimes it surely does rhyme. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Zimmerman telegraph was that how did they communicate? Well, they had Western Union. And the United States government, when the existence of the Zimmerman telegraph became known, they went to Western Union and they said, give us the transcription of everything to prove that this telegram was sent from the German embassy in Washington to the German embassy in Mexico City. Give us the transcript. You know what Western Union said back then? And think about this in terms of privacy today and telecommunications. They said, oh, we can't give you that. That's private communications between our customer, and we can't do it. So the U.S. government actually went to court and threatened Western Union. And you know what? Western Union gave up the telegram. That was one of the ways in which they were able to prove it. So history may not repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. And when you think of what happened in the aftermath of World War I, we had things like, we had women's suffrage because women had gotten a much bigger role in society during World War I, and they rightfully demanded finally to have suffrage. That was one result. Another result was the kingdoms and the empires of Europe came crashing down. Austria-Hungary was no more. The reign of their emperor, Franz Joseph, was for 65 years, and that ended. And all of those states that came about in Yugoslavia and Albania and Serbia, and the ethnic and other regional rivalries that were fostered by what happened in World War I continued. And of course the Treaty of Versailles, which of course was a temporary thing because it didn't truly end the animosities, and indeed it planted the seeds for World War II, which our valiant veterans are here. So it's an extraordinary event that took place 100 years ago, and the ripples and the impact of that event on our lives today are things that perhaps Americans don't fully appreciate, but it's there. And that's why it's so important that we mark this day. Well, it's actually tomorrow. Oh, no, it is today. Today. Tomorrow's the shopping day, right? But we mark this day, November 11th, at the 11th hour of 1918, and 100 years ago, and how important that is to our own history here in the United States and really the history of the world. And so Veterans Day is something that we commemorate and we honor our veterans. We should do that, and I think more and more people are recognizing we need to do that all the time, not just on a single day of the year, and not certainly on a single day, Memorial Day, where we remember our dead. But our veterans really are the bulwark of our freedom. Down in Washington on the National Archives building, there's an inscription that says, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And our rights are guaranteed to us in the Constitution and our Bill of Rights and our founding documents. They're certainly there. But our rights are secured not by the pieces of paper, but also by the willingness of men and women to serve our country and defend our country. And that's why we honor our veterans. And certainly it gives me great privilege and honor to be able to be before you today to say that we owe so much to the men and women that fought to defend our country, that fought for our freedoms, that went forth, that left hearth and home and their loved ones, knowing full well that some may never come back and some might come back inalterably altered because of injury or mental distress from what they had experienced. But they went and they defended our flag and our freedoms. And for that we owe you our eternal gratitude. So God bless our veterans. God bless the memory of those who have departed. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Congressman Faso. He had a note there about the wounded and killed in World War I. We adorn our place on all our Legion meetings with a POW MIA chair. There are still MIAs from World War I unaccounted for, thousands of them. And we put this flag on the chair to remind us that they are still missing and not forgotten. I'd like to invite Alina Delvecchio, misprint, to come up, please, and sing God Bless America. And I'd like to have everybody join hands and sing along with her.
God bless America, the land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. You're welcome.
Thank you, Alina. Dan had mentioned poppies and Flanders Fields. Well, the American Legion hands out poppies every year, and we have brought some along. If you feel that you would like to have a poppy and you missed our drive a month or so ago, please, you're welcome to take a poppy, and if you wish to donate anything, it's up to you. We also, one other thing that Dan had mentioned about the USS Roosevelt, we have Project Fowler. It's a good time to put a plug in. On December 5th, in this very room, Ralph Alsterhout will be receiving cookies to be sent to the USS Roosevelt up to noon that day. So if you wish to bring in cookies, please put them in tins and label the tin what's in it. If there's nuts or other allergic ingredients, please note on the can, all right? We appreciate it. We sent about 15 crates last year to the ship, and we'd like to send more. They really appreciate it. It's one of their highlights of their year. They send pictures back. The smiles on their faces are unbelievable. So they are not forgotten. They may be halfway around the world, but they're not forgotten. All right? And I'd like to also ask John Golden, Ralph Alsterhout, Al Genovese, are there any other World War II vets in the audience? To please come up and stand with the congressman. I'd like to get a picture with the congressman with these veterans. Get out of the way. Alice here.
John Golden.
John Golden's here. Let's do it right now. Okay. John, would you please come back up? These wagons are probably set down. Congressman has a special certificate for these World War II vets. I'll let him do the...
Just to commemorate their service in World War II and to acknowledge it, and as a small remembrance of their service and dedication to our country, I'm pleased to present these congressional certificates to you. I'm sure you'll take it home. It'll be worth at least 14 cents in 20 days. But thank you so much.
A deep thanks to Congressman Faso for this very special award. The members that aren't here, our post will make sure that the families get the certificates. Basically, ceremony's over. We will take the wreaths out to the memorial site after the ceremony. So thank you for coming.
I just wanted to mention that we were able to add an additional plaque out at the memorial this past year. And David Ray, thank you so much for pulling that information together. And we added 40 names of people that served during the period of wartime that enlisted from Hyde Park. So it was quite a research project, and it lasted a few years. So we were really pleased and proud to be able to add that plaque too. So if people on their way out might just stop and take a look, we'd be appreciative. So again, thank you for this wonderful ceremony, and we'll see everyone next year.
Yes. And the rest of the vets in the audience, I've not forgotten you. Korean vets, Vietnam vets, Desert Storm, Afghanistan. Thank you for your service, and we appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay.